Joining me now, my first guest tonight is someone who's tracked the Trump administration and American government for years. Michael Rubin joins me there from Washington. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Rubin. 12-day war. Let's cut the chase and ask the big question. Who's really won and lost this war?
Israel came out on top. They haven't won because they haven't achieved their aims. The uranium, the enriched uranium stockpile is still missing. But it does appear that Iran's nuclear program has been set back considerably. That said, Iran can still reconstitute this, and the ceasefire may have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory.
Let's get that again. You're saying the ceasefire may have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. Are you saying, therefore, that Israel was not keen on a ceasefire, that they were pushed into this ceasefire, possibly by American pressure or, dare one say, Qatari mediation?
Israel was pushed into the ceasefire by American pressure, and we've seen that from the statements of Donald Trump. At the same time, all sides, I think, understood that there needed to be a pause because we're coming up to the month of Muharram in the Islamic calendar. And of course, on the 10th of Muharram is one of the major Shiite holidays where religious passions are naturally high. Israel didn't want to be bombing Iran at a time when the Ayatollah could really wrap people around the nationalist and religious flag.
You know, you mentioned Donald Trump briefly there, and possibly his statements coming out in the last few hours suggest that Mr. Rubin, that he was more exasperated than doing any kind of victory lap. When he mentioned Israel and Iran in the same breath and almost hyphenated them, saying he was angry with both of them, even used the F word, you sense a sense of exasperation. Is that how he felt, you think? Why wasn't he doing some kind of a victory lap?
No, I think Donald Trump truly believes that he can control the world. And that if he tells people, if he tells other countries to do something, he expects that they will do that. What he is discovering is that countries will always prioritize their own national interests over Donald Trump's feelings. The Israelis have made clear that even if there is a ceasefire, from here on in, they're going to treat the Islamic Republic of Iran much the way they treated Hezbollah. If they derive any intelligence, they are not going to hesitate to strike. In effect, Iran has become the new southern Lebanon.
In effect, also, does that mean that we have a very fragile peace, that it could take the slightest incident for this fragile truce to break?
Well, absolutely. That's the nature of most ceasefires. Ceasefires pause combat. They're not the same as peace agreements. And so we are very, very far from any sense of peace. The next question, however, and this is where the frustration of Donald Trump will likely grow with Iran, is whether they are going to fulfill his demand that they forfeit entirely their nuclear program. The Iranians don't seem to be in the mood to do that, but Donald Trump isn't your ordinary president, isn't your ordinary diplomat. He's simply not going to allow the Iranians to change the context or to prioritize the process over the end result.
No, so, Mr. Rubin, what then have the Americans and the Israelis really achieved? I know that they claimed that their stated objective, certainly the Americans claimed, was not regime change. Either way, that as of now, we don't see regime change or even regime collapse. We are still uncertain just where Iran's uranium-enriching nuclear stockpile lies. We don't know whether that's been fully destroyed or not. So what really has been achieved in your sense over these 12 days?
Let's just look at a sheet of paper and see what has been achieved and what has not been achieved.
Okay.
The not been achieved is regime change, if that was the goal. It was the goal of Israel, not of the United States. And we don't know where all the enriched uranium is. Those are the two drawbacks. What has been achieved is the destruction for months, if not years, of key Iranian facilities, Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan. Whether or not Fordo has been as destroyed as Donald Trump has claimed, whether or not it has been obliterated, it's not ready for operation. And even if you had the best Russian, Chinese, or North Korean scientists and engineers working, you're still months or years away from reconstituting that. And so ultimately, the Iranians are reeling. At the same time, the Israelis have managed to sow chaos within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It's one thing to appoint someone new to take over the position of someone who has been killed. It's another thing to build their skill set. And what Israel has successfully done is create a paranoia that corrodes within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the office of the Supreme Leader, because no one knows where the spies are. Paranoia just runs supreme.
But there will be those who will say that this regime, Mr. Rubin, has survived to fight another day. We've seen in the past the regime has this unique ability to reinvent itself almost without giving up on its core goals. And that's happened for the last 45 years. Do you believe this time it's been very different, that this 12-day war has changed that fundamentally, that this regime, therefore, could well be having its last stand?
Well, let's compare this war with the Iran-Iraq war. During the Iran-Iraq war, people rallied around the flag because they saw themselves as defending Iran. When Israel attacked, people haven't really rallied around the regime so much. In fact, many Iranians have been pointing out on social media that the casualties, even by official figures, that Israel caused, the civilian casualties, are far less than the casualties when the Iranians cracked down on protests in 2019 and 2022. So there is persistent anger directed at the regime. This is my fear, however. When Saddam Hussein was forced out of Kuwait, George H.W. Bush got up and said, "I call upon the people of Iraq to rise up and throw off Saddam Hussein." And they did. And then the United States and the international community stood aside while Saddam Hussein massacred tens of thousands. If this regime reconstitutes, the bloodbath in Iran is going to be supreme.
I want to ask you this, Michael, because there's a lot of confusion over what actually led to the ceasefire. Last night at this time, we were getting breaking news of how Iran was targeting U.S. air bases in Qatar. And that seemed to throw the world into a bit of a tailspin again. Is this conflict escalating? What happens this morning? Donald Trump unilaterally announces a ceasefire. What really changed? Was it the Qatari involvement? What made Iran and Israel agree so readily to a ceasefire?
Well, the attack on the Al Udeid air base in Qatar was mostly performative. It was ripped from the Ayatollah's playbook after the assassination of Quds Force Chief Qasem Soleimani on June 3rd, 2020. Basically, you bluster, and then you warn the Americans the attack is coming so that no one gets injured, and you're signaling that you want to save face, but you also want an off-ramp. So the Americans believe that the Iranians wanted an off-ramp. What's really looming in the background, however, is that you have these Shiite holidays coming up, and analysts are afraid of a situation in which ordinary Iranians might be riled up with religious passion. And so they want to deny Ayatollah Ali Khamenei that opportunity. The Israelis are fully cognizant of this as well.
From a Trump point of view, do you believe this has strengthened him or does it weaken him? We saw with the India-Pakistan ceasefire, Donald Trump rushing in to take credit. He's trying to do it again. You've told me in the past how he wants to be at the center of every such agreement that's made or anything that's happening in the world. But have the last 12 days actually split apart his MAGA, Make America Great Again coalition, or has it strengthened him?
I think he might come off a little bit strengthened. The MAGA coalition was always vociferous, and the sort of political rhetoric we have now has also been consistent. Now, what's actually going to happen as we start going towards midterm elections in the United States is Donald Trump is going to see who among his own coalition spoke against him, and they are going to get primaried. They're going to have to face someone else striving for their job supported by Donald Trump. And so Donald Trump is going to try to impose loyalty going into the second half of his term. And, those preambles to those midterm elections are already starting.
Just a couple of more questions, Michael. Is your sense, particularly with what Netanyahu has done to Hezbollah, to the Houthis, to taking on Hamas and now Iran, is West Asia, Middle East now going to be a little bit more stable in the near term? Or do you believe what we've seen in the last 12 days could erupt any time in the near future, and therefore we're heading for a period of chronic instability?
Well, I think it's somewhere in between. The Islamic Republic has always been a source of instability, at least from the United States perspective and from the perspective of many Arab states in West Asia. That said, it's a positive that they no longer have control over Hezbollah, that the Iraqi militias are largely staying in their barracks and so forth. My fear, and this is something to which too many American policymakers are blind, is that all these so-called resistance groups, which have been orphaned, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iraqi militias, could actually be adopted by another state like Turkey or Pakistan, or perhaps both of them.
So in that sense, from an Indian perspective, Michael, how should India see the developments of the last 12 days? We've seen Donald Trump entertain and lunch the Pakistani Army Chief, General Munir. There was a sense that he wanted Pakistan's support as a state, as a country which shares a large border with Iran, to be on America's side. Should India feel sanguine about what's happened? We generally seem to have been supportive of Israel without saying so openly. We've remained at least relatively neutral. How do you see India's options as these various fault lines emerge?
No, first of all, Donald Trump's loyalty is not long. And so Asim Munir may believe that he is Donald Trump's best friend, but make no mistake, Donald Trump isn't going to hesitate to throw Asim Munir under the bus. I think that Prime Minister Modi was wise for not getting dragged in to an amateurish and counterproductive photo opportunity. That said, India has tremendous potential to leverage its interests here. After all, I can't think of another country in the world against the backdrop of this crisis that enjoys the confidence of Washington and Jerusalem and Tehran.
My final question, we started off by saying who are the big winners? Who's the biggest loser according to you?
I think the biggest loser is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, without a doubt. The biggest loser is probably the Houthis, even though they don't realize it yet, because Iran is going to be inwardly focused as they try to ensure their own stability. The periphery, I mean, no Persian is going to die for an Arab. And the periphery, if they don't realize that, the so-called axis of resistance, they deserve what's coming to them.
Michael Rubin, as always, for speaking so plainly and clearly. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.